Penn State's defense could easily pitch a shutout against the Iowa Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And like my previous prediction episode with Penn State and Illinois, we're just going to go right into it with the prediction because that's what everybody cares about. I'm going to give my reasons, my explanations throughout this episode, but I got four main reasons why Penn State wins this game and why, well, Penn State's defense could shut out the Iowa Hawkeyes. They're just going to make the offense it's going to be a nightmare for Iowa's offense. So I'm going to go 27-6, and I got four main reasons why Penn State is going to be able to do this. Number one, the main point is the atmosphere. It's the whiteout game. Okay, Penn State already gets a 10-point advantage with this. You could maybe argue 7, but I think that Penn State just gets an astronomical advantage here against any team. So you already got to shade those points the way for the Nittany Lions. So having that whiteout, having that nighttime atmosphere is just going to be a little too much for Iowa. And they've only played in it once. We'll talk about, I have the overview coming up soon in the history about this series in general, but Penn State wins the game 27-6. And that's the first reason. The second one is revenge. The 2021 result was just not that. James Franklin does not forget these things. He didn't forget them when it came to Minnesota, last year's whiteout. Some of these things are very strategic. So Penn State is salivating at the fact that they get Iowa in this whiteout game because of that 2021 result. Not only fans, but coaches were accusing Penn State's players of exaggerating injuries. Like, that is not okay. So I think Penn State is going to remember that. There's plenty of players from that 2021 squad. It was also the beginning of the downfall of that season. Penn State was a top 5 team. They should have won that game had Sean Clifford not been hurt. Penn State easily wins that game. Franklin remembers these games, and he's going to stick it to them, okay? He will run up the score if he gets the chance. The third reason, and I just hate to see this as a college football fan because, in general, I want Penn State and Iowa to be at full strength to see what kind of game we could truly get, but that's not the case here, okay? You got to make with what you have. And for Iowa, bad luck, untimely injuries are the story for them offensively, with an offense that already struggles to begin with, averaging 250 yards per game. And you're losing your number one tight end, who also doubles as your number one wide receiver, your top 2 running backs, and Cade McNamara, frankly, isn't 100% either. But Luke Lachey is out. We've already discussed his impact, the leading wide receiver. Iowa likes to use a lot of 2 tight end sets. You do have Eric All still, but Luke Lachey is kind of that next in line of Iowa or however they do it, whatever the reason is. Maybe I need to look into the Iowa coaching staff more, but they just know how to develop tight ends, whether it was TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant, George Kittle. Really, the list is pretty extensive, surprisingly. But in this case, Luke Lachey is going to be out for this game and out for the season. Really down-to-earth guy. Hate to see that he's going to be missing. I wish that they were at full strength so we could see how Penn State would defend the likes of Luke Lachey. In addition to that, the top 2 running backs are out. Caleb Johnson, Jazz Patterson, your 2 leading rushers. Caleb Johnson's very good. He is the fastest back on the team, probably the fastest player on the team, and they're going to be without him. That is nearly 40% of their offensive production for a team that already averages 250 yards per game offensively. The last reason is the quarterback's Cade McNamara. Yes, he's a step up over Spencer Petras. Yes, he used to start for the Michigan Wolverines, but then J.J. McCarthy came in and took that job. But Cade McNamara is just he's not a good quarterback, at least against this Penn State defense. He's a solid game manager, but that's all he's really going to ever be. He's not 100%. We've already mentioned that. He's not an athletic quarterback. He can move, he can tuck the football and extend plays. I get that, but he's no speedster, and he's certainly not going to outrun the likes of Abdul Carter when Carter's back to spy and goes to chase him down on those blitz plays. He's losing the top offensive players. So the run game, your favorite target, those things that help you, your supporting cast is not there to help you and bail you out this time against a top 10 at a minimum, top 10 at a minimum, top 5 defense for Penn State. He's been second guessing himself. Watch the tape against Western Michigan. Western Michigan, of all teams. You're in week 3. I get it. McNamara still needs to adjust to a very overcomplicated Brian Ferentz offense. But McNamara, third week in starting with this new school, with this new team. And you're second guessing yourself against a MAC team and those plays. So the double clutching, the lack of confidence, you're losing your top target, you're losing your supporting cast. He's just not that accurate. So Cade McNamara is my 4th reason why Penn State is going to be able to win this game because they're going to force turnovers and make it absolutely miserable for McNamara to do anything offensively. So I do have some other game predictions here. There's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 turnovers. Okay. I do think Penn State commits its actual first turnover offensively. Iowa's defense is very respectable. I think they're top 3 in the Big Ten to go along with Penn State and Michigan. So there could collectively be 3 turnovers on 3-2 Penn State over Iowa. I think Penn State forces more turnovers, but Penn State is certainly going to sacrifice at least one in this game. There's going to be at least 1 defensive touchdown too. I don't know how Iowa's going to get that 6 points. Maybe it's 3 safeties. Maybe it's 2 field goals. Maybe it's a defensive touchdown and no PAT. They got a really good special teams unit. So a defensive special teams touchdown by one team, at least Penn State, maybe by both sides. It's very capable. I think that I do respect Iowa's special teams. They got a good special teams unit. So the special teams or the defense is going to have to score points because the offense certainly won't for the Hawkeyes. But I can almost all but guarantee that Penn State in this game, especially with the weather, and we're going to talk a little more about the overview, the overarching story and the conditions going into this game in just a second. So keep with me right here. But a defensive touchdown, I would say a scoop and score for Penn State's defense, a fumble, pick it up and go to the house. That's what's going to happen for Penn State's defense. And then to go along for that, 7 sacks. Penn State's defense is going to have 7 sacks. I think Chop Robinson gets 2 sacks. I think Abdul Carter gets 2 sacks. And then somewhere along the way, a cornerback, a linebacker, anybody else is going to be able to contribute. I'd like to see Dennis Sutton get involved, maybe get a sack or 2 against Cade McNamara, but I think Penn State is going to be able to get a lot of pressure against Iowa, especially since they're going to be playing from behind a majority of the game. Now we're going to have coming up talking about what Penn State's going to do with the football, what Iowa's going to do with the football, and why it leads to my score prediction of 27-6, Penn State over Iowa. Now here is the overview. Penn State is a 14.5-point favorite with a total of 40. On and off rain throughout the day. Rain is at 50%. Earlier in the week, it was at 90%. You gotta love weather forecasts, right? You can be wrong with your forecasts and still keep your job. If I'm wrong with my predictions, you're not going to trust me as much, will you, huh? But rain right now is at 50% at kickoff and then throughout the game. So Beaver Stadium is probably going to see some inclement weather, and hopefully it holds out. Hopefully Beaver Stadium is out of that 50% of the area. Penn State is 3-0. Number 7 in the nation. Iowa is 3-0, number 24 in the nation. So this is a battle of top 25 Big Ten teams. West Virginia, Delaware, Illinois, those are all the wins for the Nittany Lions. For the Hawkeyes, Utah State, Iowa State, and Western Michigan. The series began in 1930. It's been a long time, almost 100 years. Penn State has 17 wins to its credit. Iowa with 14. So not a lopsided series by any stretch of the imagination here. And in 2021, we know the last meeting. Iowa wins 23-20 over Penn State when Penn State was up by double digits and should have easily won that game at Kinnick, but Sean Clifford ended up getting hurt. Taquan Roberson wasn't adequately prepared, and we know the rest. Don't need to really get into it much more than that. But Penn State has actually lost the last 2 meetings. They lost in 2020, the COVID season, against the Hawkeyes. Before that, they won 6 in a row. So they did have a stretch where they dominated this series. And Iowa has played spoiler before. In 2008, Penn State had to go out to Kinnick, but a lot of people might remember this, that Daryl Clark and those Nittany Lions led by Joe Paterno had national title aspirations. They were ranked 3rd in the country. They lost to the Hawkeyes on a last-second field goal, 24-23. And then kind of a similar setup here. Penn State had national. Hindsight's 2020, right? We know that 7-6 2021 team wasn't as good as advertised, but at that time, Penn State was top 5 going into Kinnick Stadium, and then they ended up losing by the margin of a field goal. Now Penn State's welcoming Iowa back in for revenge in a whiteout game, because in 2009 this exact same setup happened. Iowa ended up winning that game 21-10 in the whiteout. That's right. Iowa was one of the few teams that has won a whiteout game at Penn State. Kirk Ferentz, for what it's worth, is undefeated in whiteout games at 1-0. 21-10 in a whiteout game. That's just downright disgraceful. But the Nittany Lions were actually ahead 10-0 and gave up 4 turnovers to the Iowa defense. And that's really all that needs to be said. So a similar setup here. You go out to Kinnick, you have your top 5 aspirations just blown to pieces, and then you welcome them back to Beaver Stadium, revenge setup, and you don't get it done. Hopefully James Franklin and this group can do what the previous team, the previous program had not been able to do over a decade ago. Okay, so names to know for Iowa offensively: Cade McNamara, LaShawn Williams, Eric All. Wide receiver Seth Anderson. Wide receivers just don't do much for the Hawkeyes. For defense, linebacker and leading tackler Jay Higgins, linebacker Nick Jackson, defensive back Sebastian Castro has a pick 6 for them. And the freshman, I'm actually really impressed with Deshaun Lee. He's a freshman. You could really name anybody from the Iowa secondary, but those are some players to know for the Hawkeyes. As for players to watch for Penn State, the wide receivers for the Nittany Lions. And the defensive backfield for the Iowa Hawkeyes is very talented. They run a smothering type of zone, but I say to an extent that wide receivers are able to get their catches. They're able to get their yardage. Iowa runs a very bend, don't break defense, a lot like Illinois, and eventually it broke. That's the idea here, is that Penn State is going to have to keep bending the Iowa defense until it ultimately breaks. But Keandre Lambert-Smith could have a very nice statistical day. I would like to see someone like this Dante Cephas step up and be a player to watch for Penn State. If Trey Wallace is not available, Amari Evans is not available, someone's got to make an impact here, okay? And if Penn State continues to sit behind and have the wide receivers not make that addition, they need someone else to step up outside of Lambert-Smith and Wallace. And this is a game for Dante Cephas to do it, especially if Trey Wallace is out, if he's not going to suit up for this game. Basically anybody in the wide receiver core. I don't care if it's Liam Clifford, Caden Saunders, if it's Malik McLean. I'm basically naming that next group of wide receivers. Somebody's got to step up. It can't just be Wallace and Lambert-Smith anymore. Chop Robinson, Curtis Jacobs. Curtis Jacobs specifically because Eric All is going to be the main target in this Iowa offense now moving forward because Luke Lachey is out. But Eric All has that chemistry and actually scored that game-winning touchdown. McNamara to Eric All in the mission. I know, I don't like to remember. That 2021 season was just bad. But Penn State should have won that game. And McNamara and All scored that game-winning touchdown on a drag route across the middle. And that was that. So Curtis Jacobs, he's going to be one of the key defenders matching up against All. I'm interested to see what Manny Diaz has in store to try to take away Eric All offensively. With that being said, that is my prediction, my overview. Now, what is Penn State going to do with the football? What's Iowa going to do with the football? That is coming up in just a moment. But first, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, then add your job and the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills, just the right experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and then hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And also sponsoring today's episode, that is DoorDash. Love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door with DoorDash grocery delivery. You can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings conveniently. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can do the same with grocery delivery that actually delivers. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or we're going to make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them yourself. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order, up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off, up to a $20 total. No minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on that first order, too. When you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. And the Locked On Podcast Network is amping up college football coverage. Every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, you can check out Locked On College Football Kickoff Live, the talent over here at the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you a full preview of 2 hours of nothing but college football for the latest playoff implications, storylines, everything going into week 4 and then beyond. It happens every Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time across all the Locked On College channels on YouTube, and then you can find them wherever you get your podcast for the Locked On College channels after it is live. But check it out on Locked On Nittany Lions and anywhere on the Locked On College channels. What's Penn State going to do with the football? I think a lot of the same. Penn State's going to run the football a lot. You have the weather implications. Iowa's secondary is really talented. They just have a lot of guys that are very good. But the poor weather, the Iowa secondary, you have to continue to protect the football, especially in these kinds of conditions. I think we'll see a lot of the same formations, meaning 2 tight end sets, 12 personnel. The offensive material is going to be pretty vanilla in this case. Hopefully we see some more outside zone runs because in between the tackles, Penn State has struggled. That interior of the 2 guards in the center just have not done enough for Penn State's ground game. I would like to see a little more outside zone rather than inside zone for Penn State. Iowa does give up its yards to its receivers, so it's the bend, don't break, and then try to force you into those turnovers. They try to bait and switch you. For Keandre Lambert-Smith or anybody that's going to go out to catch a pass, they could rack up 100 yards pretty easily. I don't think yardage is going to be an issue. It's converting inside the red zone and not giving up those turnovers. So be smart in the zones, find the spacing. I'm anticipating maybe 100 yards for Keandre Lambert-Smith here, and I would love to see Trey Wallace back because this is his kind of game. I think he would do very well against the Iowa zone. The defensive line gets little to no pressure. In 3 games, this is important to point out because you played the likes of Utah State, Iowa State, and Western Michigan. Those teams are not good. They are ranked in the 80s from the analytics. Utah State is 83rd. Iowa State's in the 70s. Western Michigan is ranked 119th, and you have 3 sacks to show for it. Also, on top of that, game script dictates this as well. For the Iowa Hawkeyes to have 3 sacks when you're leading, when you're in obvious passing situations from a defensive standpoint, your defensive line gets to pin its ears back and rush the quarterback, and you have 3 sacks to show for it. But part of that is, too, Iowa does like to drop back a lot of people into zone coverage. They will rush 3 defensive linemen at a time. Against 5 offensive linemen, 5's greater than 3. You do the math, right? But Iowa doesn't send a lot of blitzes here. But the obvious passing situations, the way that the game script unfolds, you would think that the Hawkeyes would have more they would have more pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And given the level of competition that they played as well, I'm kind of baffled by that when doing research and I saw that Iowa only has 3 sacks to this point. That's 1 per game. That's not going to cut it. Penn State has been very good in pass protection. The criticism is the run blocking. Pass pro, they've been fantastic keeping Drew Aller upright. But rain is going to hurt Penn State's case here. If it's going to rain, even if it's a 50% chance, if it is going to rain consistently throughout that game, it is going to be tough for Penn State to want to pass the football, to take advantage of some of those things like the secondary giving up yards, bend, don't break, but they give up the yardage. Penn State can get into plus territory pretty easily and just continue to establish drives. And then the defensive line getting no pressure. Drew Aller will have all day to sit back there and read a book, right? Iowa likes to drop people back into zone coverage. I get that. Maybe we could see if Penn State's going to get a little fancy here. Maybe we see something new. Bo Prabula comes in as a more wildcat design packages instead of just garbage time and him getting to run the football. Maybe something that's a little more designed where he and Aller are on the field at the same time. Maybe we do see that in this Iowa game. But expect more of the same. I don't think Penn State needs to reinvent the wheel here. It's a winnable game without the extracurricular plays. I'm giving Penn State a 3-touchdown advantage here. They're going to cover the spread. They win this game guaranteed. It's just a matter of how much. But Penn State doesn't need to do anything that's over the top to beat this Hawkeyes team. Save your special plays. Gear those up for the likes of Ohio State and Michigan when you need them, because this is a winnable game without all the additional bells and whistles. I'd like to see more of the 21 and 22 personnel. I think that dynamic duo of having Singleton and Allen in the backfield together at the same time, or just have them on the field outside of the T formation at the same time. But maybe that's the same thing. That offensive package, Mike Yursich, James Franklin, want to save that for another time. I'd say save it for a rainy day, but it is going to be a rainy day against the Iowa Hawkeyes here. But that is what Penn State's going to do offensively. It's going to look a lot of the same, but it's going to be enough to get it done. They don't have to feel threatened by the Iowa Hawkeyes here. Now, this is what Iowa's going to try to do offensively, but more importantly, what Penn State's going to be able to do schematically on defense. Before we get to that, let's hear from another sponsor of today's episode, and that is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is right, $200 by just betting $5. We know that Penn State is a 14.5-point favorite against the Hawkeyes. The total is set at 40. Why not take advantage of that spread and go to FanDuel right now, bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, win or lose on that bet. Plus, all customers who bet the $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now's the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads, player props, money lines, totals, you name it. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege and kick off football season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. And Locked On Nittany Lions is your go-to podcast for HappyValleyInsider.com. Penn State rivals, they have their own preview. I have a notebook from the most recent Penn State practice up there. But for more comprehensive coverage around Penn State football, Penn State sports in general, check out HappyValleyInsider.com. When Iowa has the football, it's not good. It's not going to be good. It will never be good. Iowa is just abysmal when it comes to offensive strategy. Okay, congratulations. You put up 41 points against Western Michigan, but you struggled to get to that 41 points, may I add you. You were averaging 250 yards on offense against the 3 opponents that I told you analytically are ranked below 70, 83rd, and 119. Let me put it in a perspective for people. Penn State is averaging 500 yards of offense per game. Okay, that's all you need to know. That's double. That is exactly double what Iowa's doing. Time of possession's okay, 30 minutes. You've been in winning situations. You can control the pace of the game. The game script dictates it. But what happens when you're playing from behind? All Penn State has to do is put Iowa down by at least 2 scores, double digits, 10 points, 14 points. And then Iowa does not have the horses to try to work its way back in the game. Iowa will try to run the football, but they're not going to have a lot of success for it because Penn State is just going to game plan for it. LaShawn Williams is okay. He's respectable for a 3rd-string running back, but no Caleb Johnson, no Jazz Patterson to help Cade McNamara in this offense. Penn State is going to sell out for the run, and Iowa really has no choice with the way that they struggle to throw the football, and it's going to be raining, that Penn State will they'll know Iowa's game plan and they'll be able to smother it. Penn State's secondary is also going to be too much for these Iowa wide receivers. The wide receivers can't get open on their own. Brian Ferentz is going to have to try to scheme them open, but it's not really going to matter. The weather conditions, the game script conditions, it just does not help out the Hawkeyes in this instance. Couple that with McNamara, who I've already mentioned has been indecisive through the first 3 weeks. He's not that mobile. Penn State's defense is going to be able to just absolutely control the name of the game from start to finish, and Iowa's not going to be able to do much. That's why I say the defense and the special teams for Iowa, they're going to have to do something to get the offense in plus territory. And I think what's going to happen is there is going to be a long special teams return, maybe a punt return. There's also going to be maybe a turnover in plus territory. Iowa makes a couple of field goals. That's how they get their 6 points. That's why. But the defense for Penn State is going to have a lot of fun in the whiteout game. Penn State's just going to sack the box. They're going to blitz a lot. There's no threat of the big plays. Iowa doesn't have any game changers offensively. There is not a player. That was Luke Lachey. That was Caleb Johnson, but those two guys are gone. They're not in this game. The goal for Penn State's defense is just get pressure, force turnovers, and force Iowa to play from behind. Kind of the similar strategy with Illinois here. And now that you're at home, you can do the exact same thing here. If there's any key matchup that Penn State needs to watch for, it is Eric All. He's a good tight end. He just happens to be the number 2 because Luke Lachey is better than him. But Eric All, a very good complementary tight end. He can be the number 1 tight end. He will be in this offense moving forward. Bracket him. Do what you need to do. Take that target away. James Franklin said it in his post-practice press conference. He said, we want to take the first read away. The first read is going to be Eric All. The cornerbacks can be on islands against these wide receivers. So all you got to do is double team Eric All and then blitz Cade McNamara, and you'll have no issues. It is really simple. Similar game plan versus Illinois. Try to take the run game away. Force, at the time, Luke Altmaier, right, to play from behind and to throw a bunch. Cade McNamara could throw just as many interceptions as Luke Altmaier did for Illinois. The rain will probably not set up too many passing opportunities for the Hawkeyes, but still, I think Penn State could end up with 3 interceptions, maybe 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles. Penn State's going to have a lot of turnovers. They're going to have 7 sacks, as I mentioned, get a lot of pressure on someone who's Luke Altmaier. You had to respect his legs. He could run the football. Cade McNamara can't do that. Iowa doesn't have any game changers. This is an easy one for Penn State. They cover the spread. They win the game. The total is going to stay under because of the weather conditions, and both defenses are very good. Top 3 in the Big Ten. Penn State top 10 in the nation in the minimum. At the top 10 in the nation at a minimum. Penn State is going to get it done 4-0, improve to 2-0 in the Big Ten. Very important moving forward to get to that Big Ten championship. Check out the other episodes. There's a recruiting preview with Brian Smith to talk about all the prospects that are coming to Happy Valley for the Whiteout. Also got the chance to talk to Trent Condon of Locked On Hawkeyes to get that preview behind enemy lines and what the Hawkeyes are thinking. And for more Penn State football content, analysis, all of it is going to be right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So become an everydayer, subscribe to the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcast. Let me know your score prediction, and I'll talk to you next time after Penn State beats the Iowa Hawkeyes here on Locked On Nittany Lions.